Thought I'd seen every frontier tale until a way station cook stepped barefoot into January and a rancher answered with 6 plain words, "I ain't huntin' heirs." If too old ever branded you, settle in. This winter will measure a town, bend a debt, and prove 2 snow circles can outlast a blizzard. North wind worried the eaves of Quartz Creek Way Station. The porch boards ticked as the frost bit through them. Inside, the iron stove popped and settled. Ada Mae Quinn kept the lid rattling just enough to breathe, not enough to waste wood. Her hands were split along the knuckles. She rubbed a smear of mutton tallow into the cracks and went back to the bread dough. Travelers came in with snow on their hats, shook it off, ate, and pushed on. Ada poured coffee black as creek rock and said little. Love this tale? Hit like, share, and subscribe to keep the West wild. She moved quick, straight-backed, clean in her work. Steam rose from the washtubs and hung low under the rafters. The room smelled of flour dust, horse, and wet wool. Near noon, a bank boy in a sealskin cap stepped up and nailed a notice to the post by the door. 3 fast blows. When he left, the paper flapped thin as a leaf. Ada wiped her hands and went to read it. 60 days in tall print, and Peabody's stiff signature below. If the arrears weren't cleared, the way station would be seized. She read it twice, then went back to her stove as if the words were only weather. By mid-afternoon, the coach came. Men stamped their boots, blew into their fists. One said, not even soft, "Too old for dreamin', that one." Another laughed through chapped lips. Ada slid bowls of stew onto the plank table and set bread beside them. "More coffee?" she asked. The men said they were fine. They always were fine. When the room emptied, she scrubbed tin plates till they flashed. She took a small pry bar and squared a crooked hinge on the pantry door. The latch had been squealing at night, a thin sound that made the hours longer. She wrapped a strip of rawhide around the hasp, tested it once, then twice. Quiet. A little quiet goes a long way in winter. Toward evening, the sky went the color of pewter. Quartz Creek lay under a lid of ice. The current muttered far below. Ada carried split wood from the shed, 2 armloads, no waste in her steps. The cold bit clean through her dress and into the bone. She set the last stick, banked the fire, and took a minute on the back stoop. Breath showed white in front of her and drifted off. She thought about the notice, the 60 days that already felt shorter than that. Mrs. O'Hara kept the books and kept a brave face. But sums were sums. Work harder, Ada told herself. Stretch beans, patch sacks, make the stove reach. Winter passes. It always has. Still, something pinched behind her ribs and would not let up. In the washroom, she found the scarf she'd mended at noon, a gray thing, pilled and thin. She worked a last row of stitches, neat and tight. It would hold one more season. Most things would if you were stubborn about it. Later, when the lamps were down and the barn was fed, she checked doors with mittened hands, front, side, pantry, tack. Each latch clicked soft. She listened a moment to the empty room and felt the old itch of leaving, of taking the freight road and walking until the wind turned warm. She set that thought aside like a hot pan and let it cool. At the window, she watched as snow sift across the yard. The drift by the hitch rail had a hard crust already. The world out there was white and exact. You either stood up to it or you didn't. She knew which sort she was. She had stood up to worse than weather. From the bunkhouse, someone laughed, one of the freighters blowing off the last of his day. Ada blew out the lamp, and the room settled into stove glow. She laid out tomorrow's flour, set beans to soak, hung her wet mittens near the door. The place looked square and ready. She liked it that way. Before bed, she opened the back door a crack, just to hear the cold. It sang along the porch boards. She tightened her shawl, reached down, and thumbed at the rawhide-wrapped latch. Quiet as a kept promise. She shut the door and stood there with her palm on the wood till the sting left her fingers. Then she went to her cot, pulled the mended scarf over her hair, and slept in the smell of smoke and soap, with snow drifting steady outside and 60 short days folded tight in the dark. Past midnight the stove had settled to a red eye. The way station breathed slow. Ada sat up in her cot and could not make her thoughts lie down. The room had that winter quiet that makes every hinge sound like a shout. She swung her feet to the floor, found her shawl, and lit the back lantern with 2 practiced strikes. Kerosene licked the glass. Light went honey yellow. She stepped onto the stoop. The sky was hard with stars, the kind that looked nailed up there. Snow lay clean over the yard, drifted smooth against the hitch rail. The cold went to work on her cheeks at once. She set the lantern on a nail head, lifted one foot, then the other, and unbuckled her boots. The leather had a tired sigh leaving her heels. She peeled off the wool socks. Steam showed off her skin and vanished. First step under the snow was a knife. Second step was a clearer knife. She breathed until the sting flattened out into something she could stand. Then she made a slow turn. 1, 2. The lantern threw a coin of light. Her shadow moved with her, easy, as if it knew the steps already. She wasn't pretty about it, not graceful like a show. She kept her arms close for balance and let her feet find the measure. The crust crackled under her toes, cold climbed to the ankles, and stopped there, held back by stubbornness and breath. She turned again. The aches that lived behind her ribs loosened a notch. Wind combed the cottonwoods and carried a few dry leaves across the crust. With a papery whisper, she felt the 60 days shrink and grow by turns, like a bellows. The ring of prints made itself, dark ovals in the shine. It looked a little like a wreath or a small corral that might hold a skittish thing till morning. "No one here but the weather," she said, voice gone thin in the cold. The words vanished like steam. She turned once more for good measure and stopped. Her feet had gone past hurt into a kind of numb that warned of its own edge. She stood still and let the night speak over her. Ice ticking in the creek, the barn groaning as timbers settled, the faint clink of a trace chain in the dark. Up on the rimrock, a horse stamped. She didn't hear it. A man had come along the high bush track, leading a pack animal, checking the line of fence where it ran close to the drop. He saw the lantern first, a low star against the snow. Then he saw the figure in that coin of light, barefoot, turning slow. He drew his horses to a stand and set his coat against the wind. He didn't call out. The night didn't want a voice in it. He watched long enough to know it wasn't madness. It was a woman making heat the way she could, holding her own against January. The wind worried his hat brim and salted his face. The horses breathed smoke. He let the sight sit with him until it earned its place, the way a good trail does under a hoof. Ada bent fast as she could with cold hands and worked socks back on, then boots. The pain came roaring as blood returned. She gritted her teeth and laughed once, a short, surprised sound that nobody heard. She took the lantern down and went inside, careful where she set her wet feet on the plank. The door shut. The backyard went to silver again. The man on the rimrock waited a little longer. The lantern glow narrowed and died. He eased his horses along the track, slow so iron wouldn't sing on stone. Down in the draw the creek muttered under ice, as if telling the same old joke it told every winter. He aimed for home with the picture of a woman in a yellow circle, standing up to the cold by her own lights. Inside the way station, Ada rubbed her feet with tallow till the sting eased. She wrapped the mended gray scarf round her hair and lay back down. The room smelled like kerosene and bread. Sleep came as the stove ticked once, then twice, like a clock that belonged to nobody but the season. Morning came pale and mean. Ice fog hung along Quartz Creek like breath that wouldn't move on. Eli McCrae eased his sorrel down the grade from the rimrock, packhorse trailing, tack creaking slow. He'd been out before first light, checking a stretch of wire where elk liked to bully through. 3 pines stood black against the sky on his ridge, his marker in all weathers. Below, the way station threw up a thin thread of smoke that said somebody had the good sense to stay ahead of the cold. He tied off at the hitch rail where the drift had a hard crust. The sorrel blew steam and nosed for grain it wouldn't find. Eli patted the warm place where neck met shoulder. "Won't be long," he told the horse, same as he always did. Inside, heat hit his face and fogged his lashes. The stove wore a halo. A coffee pot sat there like a promise. Ada Mae was wiping a table with a clean rag, movements square and neat. She looked up, gave a nod that wasn't friendly or unfriendly, just true. "What can I get you?" she asked. "Nails, salt," Eli said, "and that coffee, black enough to float a horseshoe if you got it." She poured without waste, filled the tin cup steady to the rim. He tasted. It bit good. He set a coin by the saucer, and the coin skated a little on flour dust. "You run that place up under the 3 pines," she said, not quite a question. "Do," he said. "Cattle, a few good mares, wind owns the rest." She wrapped a small sack of salt, counted nails into a paper twist by touch, the way a person who works learns to count, by sound and weight. He watched her hand. The skin across the knuckles was lifted and red where the cold had split it. She flexed once when she thought no one could see, then kept on. "Hard hands are honest hands," Eli said, plain as weather. She set the nails down, met his eyes a beat longer than polite would ask, then let her gaze slide to the window. Outside, a gang of Circle H boys had drifted to the porch, as boys will. Too much talk, not enough work. Travis Holt had his hat cocked and his mouth loose. "There she is," Travis said to nobody in particular, loud enough to carry. "Old gal's got herself a snow hex dance, I hear, barefoot and all. Spooks the weather into mindin' her." The laugh that followed was thin and high, more cold than mean. It found chinks and got in. Love this tale? Hit like, share, and subscribe to keep the West wild. Ada didn't flinch. She folded the twist of nails and set it with the salt. "Anything else?" she asked Eli, voice level. Before he could answer, boots thumped on the boards and the door shoved open to let in Travis's hat, his grin, and 3 of his like. Sheriff Harlan Pike came right behind them, big shoulders filling the light. "Keep it down, boys," Harlan said. "Place like this, noise costs heat." Travis spread his hands like he meant peace. "Just looking to warm up with a story or 2, he said, eyes still on Ada. "Maybe learn a step, might help a man in courtin'." Doc Estelle pushed out from a back table, small in her coat, collar turned up, spectacles fogged at the edges. She had a little doctor's bag at her boot and a wool cap pulled down so low it made her ears stick. "Hands that bake bread don't need your sour mouth, Travis Holt," she said. "And if you're fixin' to dance, try doing it with your hat off and your pride set aside. Better for balance." Snickers circled the room, different from the first kind. Travis's grin thinned. Eli didn't raise his voice. He turned a little so the Circle H boys had to look at him soon to keep the game going. "A decent man minds his own barn first," he said. "After he's sure his stock is watered and his fences hold, he might hazard a thought about somebody else's steps. Till then, he's just frost-talking." Sheriff Harlan scratched his jaw like he was working on a burr under his glove. "You heard him," he said to Travis. "Mind your barn and your tone." Travis's boys shifted. One found his boots suddenly interesting. Another scraped ice off his heel with a spur tip. Travis tipped his hat, made a show of good humor that didn't reach his eyes. "Didn't mean no harm," he said, and drifted back out to the porch, where wind could take his words and thin them down. The door set to with a hard click. Heat leaned back into the room. Doc Estelle put a dime on the counter for coffee she didn't really need. the dime bright as a new tooth. "Keep the pot running," she told Ada. "6 moving up from the valley. I'll be in and out." Ada poured for the doctor, set the cup where it wanted setting. She didn't look at Eli for thanks or rescue. She didn't look at Sheriff for permission to breathe. She looked at the stove and checked the draft, then at the window where the day had sharpened into a sheet of white. "Anything else?" she asked again, same even tone, as if none of it had pumped blood any quicker. Eli slid the sack and the twist of nails into his coat. "That'll do." He took one step toward the door, then set the tin back down and stood there a heartbeat longer. "Snow rides the fence hard up by the bend in Quartz," he said. "If you're sending anybody out that way, tell 'em to walk the lee side. Ice is thick, but it's hollow in spots." "Noted," she said. He pushed outside. The cold took him, clean like a blade dipped in water. On the porch, the Circle H boys stared out at nothing, pretending they had business with the sky. Eli didn't give them any more of himself than they'd bought. He untied the sorrel, checked the pack lash once, and swung up. From the doorway, Ada watched him go. A man who spoke like winter, counted, and didn't spend words he couldn't back. Sheriff Harlan tugged his hat brim, half to her, half to the stove. Doc Estelle blew across her coffee, eyes on nobody, thinking her doctor thoughts. Out in the yard, the sorrel's hooves rang once on frozen ground. Eli set his shoulders into the cold, pointed toward the 3 dark spires on Swishaba's Ridge. Behind him, the way station door shut quiet as a kept secret. The town had said what it meant for now, half carry, half cackle, and winter went on not caring which was its way. Cold sharpened toward evening, the kind that cuts breath into pieces. Ada had just pulled a pan of biscuits when hooves hammered the yard hard enough to shake flour from the rafters. The door banged and Eli McCrae stepped through, white from hat brim to spur. Snow steamed off his coat. "Creek shelved in," he said, already moving. "Calf's through. Dams crowded the ice. Need hands and heat." Ada didn't ask who else he'd tried. There wasn't time, and it didn't matter. "Ruth," she called. "Blankets and the big kettle. Old Miss Grady. Fire to the back of the barn. Hot as you can make it." Grady levered himself up with a grunt, eyes bright, the way old men get when the job is simple and sharp. "Fire first," he said, snagging his cap. "Coal's a thief." Eli was rolling rope as he talked. "Shelf is thin at the bend. We cut a slot, turn the calf, haul him through. Don't step blind." They trotted the short track to Quartz Creek, boots ringing on frost, their breath running ahead like smoke. The creek lay flat as pewter, the current talking far below. On the near side the herd pressed, eyes showing white, steam pulling off their backs. A heifer bawled raw, and the sound went into Ada's ribs like a hand. The calf was in, chest deep in black water, at a place where the ice had caved and skinned back. His forelegs scrabbled against the slick lip. Every thrash sent a shiver across the shelf. Eli kicked at a drift, found the hard edge, and put his weight where ice would listen. He threw the coil, and it kissed the calf, slid, missed, came back dripping. "Hold the coil," Ada said, taking it without heat. "You chop, close in, not wild, clean." Eli set the axe and began to trim a long, narrow slot, neat bites that hissed and spit. Ada ran the rope again, lower this time, feeling with the backs of her hands where the water wanted to pull. The calf's head knocked her knee once, and she went to a squat to stay wide and strong. "Easy, boy," she said, voice like talking to bread to make it rise. "You ain't the first near-drowned thing I've seen." The ice cracked long and mean, a sound like a fiddle string going. Eli shifted to the lee side without thinking. The slab under him tilted, and he dropped to a knee, palm skidding. The rope jerked and burned a stripe across his glove and through it. He let it go before it could take him with it. Back, he snapped, but Ada was already where she meant to be. She kicked free of one boot, then the other, shoved them aside and waded the slot he'd cut. Water climbed her dress and took her breath. It was a hurt that had its own voice. She set her toes on rough gravel under the lip and grabbed the anchor post, an old stump they'd used to tie a sledge some winter before. "Tie me," she said through her teeth. "Something that won't change its mind." Eli's hands were fast and sure, even with the burn. He wrapped the rope low at her waist, hit the stump with 2 turns, leaned back to set it. Ruth arrived then, running, blankets like sails under her arms, cheeks streaked red from the air. "Where?" she gasped. "By the fire," Ada said, "and don't trip the draft." Grady's blaze was throwing heat now, boards crackling, pitch popping like rifle caps. He fed it with a steady hand and no fuss, eyes on the water. "Pull on the beat of the creek," he said to nobody. "Don't fight it, son, you'll lose." Ada slid a loop under the calf's chest, then another forward of the shoulders. The little bull rolled an eye at her, wild and dark. "You and me," she said. "We're getting out of this. Count of 3, Mr. McCrae." Eli set his boots and leaned. "1, he said. The ice cried again. Ada felt the shelf give under her supporting foot and drove her toes deeper into the gravel. 2. Ruth, small as she was, put her hands on the rope behind Eli and made herself part of the pull like a second knot. 3. The rope came tight, sang, bit into the wet of Ada's skirt, into her hip, into Eli's palm, where the skin had gone raw. The calf lurched, hit the lip, slid, kicked. Ada jammed her shoulder under him, teeth bared, and shoved up while Eli and Ruth took weight. The calf toppled into the slot they'd cut and then onto the ice, splayed and shivering, steam jumping off him like he was a fresh loaf thrown from the oven to winter air. "Blanket," Ada said, voice gone mild again. Ruth wrapped him hard. Eli dragged the bundle to the fire and stood there with his hands out, not for himself, but to feel the heat go into the animal. He was shaking and didn't seem to know it. Blood had made a bright lace across one glove where the rope burned through. Ada climbed out of the slot, set her bare foot to ice, and hissed in spite of herself. Blood beaded from a nick at her heel and went pink under the snow. She didn't look at it. She took a second blanket, rubbed the calf's ribs with a will, pushed air into him the rough way until his breath found its pace. "Good," Grady said to the flames, as if they were a dog. That it minded. "Good." The herd settled by degrees as the heifer came to nose her young, lowing with her mouth, then with her whole throat. Eli watched Ada from the corner of his eye and saw her hands working steady, not asking for praise or pity. He felt the burn in his palm flare and fade with the pulse, and let it be. When the calf tried to stand and made it on the second go, Ruth laughed. Not a child's squeal, but a low, relieved thing. Ada's shoulders dropped that last half-inch they'd been holding for an hour. "Get him to the barn," she said. "Let him breathe wood smoke a while." They made the walk back slow. Ruth trotted ahead to open. Grady held the door, the fire in the back throwing a fat glow into the bay. They laid the calf into straw and tucked blankets around him like a baby. At the kitchen threshold, Eli stopped. Boots left a wet print that would freeze in minutes. He set a pair of fur-lined boots just inside the door, plain and good, not new but sound. He didn't say a word. Ada looked at them a long breath. Her feet had gone through hurt to not feel and back again. The cut at her heel had sealed under cold and would open later near the stove. She lifted her eyes. "There's stew left," she said. "If you'll sit." It wasn't an invitation to talk. Eli shook his head once. "Stock'll need settlin'." He tipped his hat to Ruth and to Grady, then to Ada. That same short nod he gave Weather he respected. He turned and went out into the thin blue of evening. Ada stood there with the boots at her toes and the kettle whispering behind her. She didn't take them, not yet. She ladled stew into a bowl for Grady, poured milk for Ruth, and fed the fire a measured stick. Out back the creek ticked under its lid, like a clock you didn't wind but could still hear. The way station breathed, and heat came back into her in slow, honest inches. By late afternoon the light went to chalk, and the wind found a new gear. Snow came flat and hard, not pretty, grit in it like blown salt. The coach out of the valley lurched into the yard and died there, wheel ruts filling as quick as they were made. The driver swung down, cussing gentle, hat iced over, 2 passengers behind him blinking like owls. "White out on the flats," he said. "If we push, we freeze. If we wait, we might." That was sense enough. Ada had the kitchen open before he finished talking. Wet coats hung like seals along the pegs. Steam stood in the rafter. Doc Estelle shouldered through with her little bag and a coil of calm. "Hot broth first," she told nobody and everybody. Old man Grady fed the back roof fire till it roared steady. Ruth laid out bowls, the chipped ones in front, the good ones behind, same as always. Wind shouldered the way station, asked to come in. The shutters shivered. Sheriff Harlan helped the driver stable the team, both men white to the eyebrows when they stamped back in. The room settled into that siege quiet where spoons and breath-mark time. Ada kept the coffee dark and the stew thick. She moved like a woman who knew every board underfoot. Night hit early. Snow stacked against the door and made the room smaller by the inch. When the last bowl clinked down empty, and the last pair of hands found a blanket spot near the stove, Ada slipped the bar on the back door and stood with her palm on it. 60 days had moved closer. The worry was a nail she kept bumping with her ribs. She lifted the lantern and stepped to the stoop. The yard was gone. Only a bright oval of snow, and beyond it, gray that moved. Wind took her breath the way cold takes a song. She set the lantern where it always went, on the nail-head, and unbuckled her boots. The leather gave and let her go. Socks next. Air bit her toes like a lit match. She set both feet down at once. Pain shouted and eased to a steady yell she could ride. She turned slow inside the light. The crust wasn't there tonight. Only new snow, dry and squeaking, taking her prints clean. She made her circle without hurry. She wasn't fighting the weather. She was taking something back from it. With each turn she unwound an old promise, the one she'd made into her mother's hair years ago. No husband, no babies, no more hope than what fit in a day's work. "I said it because I meant it then," she told the air. "I don't mean it now." A shape loomed out of the gray and resolved into Eli McCrae, a sack of coal over one shoulder, hat rim white, lines of wind at the corners of his eyes. He didn't come straight in. He stood at the edge of her circle as if it were a church, and you don't step across a service. He slid the coal sack down, eased the lantern a finger's width to keep flame from hopping, and looked at her without hurry or claim. She nodded once and kept moving. The wind breathed words into his coat and then forgot them. He unhooked his spurs with a thumb, bent and worked his boots off. Socks followed. His feet hit the snow and he sucked air through his teeth, then set his jaw and made the same slow turn, not touching her, not crowding her light. Side by side, 2 small planets in a weather big enough to swallow anything careless. They stood still together at the end. Snow stung their ankles. The lantern hissed. Somewhere close the barn timbers creaked like an old man changing his mind. Ada's mouth was so cold the words came soft and clear. "I can't bear children," she said. No drama in it, no apology, just the thing that was. Wind pushed at them. The lantern flame leaned and came back. Eli didn't fill the silence quick. He let the fact stand and took its weight like a load he'd decided was his. Then he said it, plain and flat enough to hold. I ain't huntin' heirs. I'm huntin' a winter partner. He tipped his chin toward the black under the snow. Somebody who'll hold a rope when the shelf goes. Somebody who'll laugh once when her feet come back to life. Ada let out a breath she'd been saving for years. The hurt in her feet bloomed hot and true. Tears sprang without salt, just water the cold pushed out. She laughed, small and surprised, the way a person laughs at a good horse that comes when you whistle, because it wants to. The lantern light turned her hair into old gold. She wasn't young, she was here. "Town'll talk," she said after a while, because that was also true. "Town's got lungs," Eli said. "It has to use him." He bent and knocked snow from his socks, then stood barefoot still, because leaving would have been the wrong kind of hurry. "We'll work. We'll keep each other inside the weather." A gust jumped the yard and tried the door. From inside came the sound of Ruth's quick feet and Doc Estelle's calm voice, a pot lid rattling, Harlan's cough. Living sounds. Ada reached for her socks. Eli didn't hand her anything. He let her do it. She slid her feet into wool, then leather, winced as blood woke the cuts she'd earned that afternoon, and straightened. He did the same, both of them awkward for a breath, then steady. "Coal's by the bin," he said. "I'll throw more in the morning." "You'll eat?" she said. Not a question. He nodded once. "I'll eat." They shouldered into the kitchen. Heat took them like a blanket laid over sore shoulders. The room smelled like beef and wet dog and wool and kerosene, which is to say, it smelled like winter going as well as it could. Grady glanced up, knew, and said nothing. Ruth's eyes were bright with that look a child gets when grown folks are brave the right way. Doc Estelle poured 2 cups from a pot that had more mercy in it than medicine. She didn't ask where they'd been. Love this tale? Hit like, share, and subscribe to keep the West wild. Ada set the coal on, banked the stove, and put bowls down for whoever still had room. Eli took a corner by the door where a draft should have been, and wasn't because she had fixed it. They ate, not fast, not slow, with the quiet a good meal earns. When the bowls went empty, Ada looked at Eli and found no hurry there, only heat enough for a night and maybe more if they were careful. She felt the fear that had lived under her ribs sidle back a step. Still there, but smaller. "We'll talk by the fire when folks are settled," she said. "Reckon we will," he said. Outside, the storm shook out its last hard hand. Inside, the way station held. The lantern hung on its nail and did its small work. In the yard, 2 circles of prints slowly filled, then softened, then disappeared under fresh snow that kept its own counsel. When the last spoon hit tin and the snoring started, the room thinned to coals and whisper. Ada set the bar, turned the lantern down to a soft ring, and sat on a low stool by the stove with her palms open to heat. Eli took the split-bottom chair nearest the draft that wasn't there anymore because she'd fixed it. Ruth had curled in a corner with a quilt. Grady smoked a stub at the back door and watched the snow mind its own business. Doc Estelle sorted vials with fingers that never rattled. Eli pulled a bundle from his coat. It was a scarf, thick and plain, the color of river stones. The knit was tight, a ranch hand's stitch, made to last, not to brag. He held it the way a man holds a bridle he's offering to a nervous horse. "Made this in a line shack winter," he said. "Hands needed work, and the wind needed answerin'. No hurry on anything, but—" He set it on the stool edge between them. "Together holds heat." Ada looked at the scarf a long time, then at his rope-burned palm. A raw stripe crossed it like a red road. She reached for the tallow tin, worked a clean knuckle into it, and held out her hand. "Let me," she said. He set his hand in hers. She rubbed the mutton fat in with small, sure circles. He watched the way she didn't flinch at hurt. "Town will talk," she said at last, eyes still on his palm. "It's already talking. I don't have spare breath to feed it." "They'll run out of wind," he said. They never do. She set the tin aside. I don't want to be the weight that sinks your winter. You've got cattle to keep, fences to stand. I've got a house full of mouths, and there's the paper on the post. Eli didn't lean closer, didn't crowd the quiet. I don't carry what I can't tie down, he said. If a thing's too much for one back, we throw another shoulder under it, that's all. Ada slid the scarf back toward him with 2 fingers. Not yet. The words were soft, like setting hot iron back on the anvil to cool. I need to think standing up, not leaning. Fair, he said, one word that took no offense. He rose, settled the scarf on hang, a peg by the door like it already belonged to the room, and reached for his coat. I'll look in at daylight. Snow's drifting bad along the east wall. Doc Estelle glanced up, spectacles catching stove glow. You two are speaking in grown folks, she said dry. Best kind. Sleep if you can. Tomorrow's coming greedy. Morning came, wolf gray. The wind had chewed the drifts into knifebacks. Sheriff Harlan stomped snow off his boots and brought in a blast of cold, and a man in a sealskin cap. Peabody's boy again, the notice nailer. He held a fresh paper, edges damp. Banks move the line, he said, not looking at anyone long. 45 days, not 60, accrued interest. Mr. Peabody says winter squeezes him same as it squeezes you. Harlan took the paper, read it slow, jaw working. Winter squeezes cows and folks too, he said. But cows and folks don't write their own mercy. He pinned the new notice where the old one hung. The words looked colder than the door air. Ada didn't let her hand stop. She set coffee, counted bread ends, kept the stove honest. Inside her ribs, something she'd just unlatched last night eased shut again by a thumb's width. She felt the pinch and hated herself a little for it. Travis Holt walked in on the smell of coffee like he owned the smell, hat cocked, mouth easy. Heard your clock got wound tighter, he said, eyes sliding past Ada toward the wall with the paper. Shame, O'Hara's run a friendly roof. Hate to see friendly turn foolish. My boss would be obliged to take this place off your hands and carry the town's burden proper. Clean house, new help, rules folks respect. His glance tagged Ada and Ruth like labels. Ruth straightened from the dishpan, water dripping off her wrists. Old man Grady didn't turn, but his smoke drifted Travis's way like a comment. Sheriff Harlan's shoulders filled a little more of the doorway. Eli came in then, snow on his hat brim, a look that said he'd been out where wind does its real work. He read the room same way he read a track, quick and right. He stepped to the notice and skimmed it, then to Ada's side without touching her. How much on the interest? He asked Harlan. Harlan told him. It wasn't kind. Eli nodded once and didn't say numbers where Travis could enjoy them. He looked at Ruth. You still got that list Doc made? Who's laid up? Who's hungry? Ruth ducked, fetched a folded paper from under the breadboard. Eli took it, glanced, and slid it into his coat. I'll see what's in my bin that can be spared without making orphans of my mares. He turned to Harlan. You post a day and stand there yourself when it's time to count. We'll do it clean. Travis laughed, the thin kind. Charity won't keep books, McCrae. Only coin does. Circle H deals in coin. We'll make an offer that don't carry sentiment. Eli gave him the kind of look you give a gate rattling in a night wind. I've seen your offers. They come with nails bent over folks' names. He shifted his weight so he faced the stove, not Travis. Ada, he said, same even tone he used about fence. I'll set 3 sacks of flour, salt, coal, and a little coffee aside. Sheriff can count it toward the pot. Doc'll name who gets fed first. No talk. We just do it. Ada felt the step she'd taken last night try to come forward again. It hung there in the air between them, not quite landed. "You don't owe this house?" she said. "No," he said. "I owe winners past. I'm paying them forward." Peabody's boy had the good sense to look at his boots. Travis didn't. 45 days, he said, savoring it. Some folks ought to learn when to quit a road. Grady flicked ash into a horseshoe nailed upside down by the door. "Some folks ought to learn when to hush," he said. "Upside-down shoe there will catch every word falls out of your mouth, Travis. Might drown you in spring." Laughter ran round the room, warm and low, not mean, enough to take the shine off Travis's grin. He tipped his hat at nothing worth tipping to and left with a scrape of spur that sounded like a lie. When the door settled, Eli reached for his hat. He touched the scarf on the peg as he passed it. "That'll hang there till it wants wearing," he said, not looking at Ada. "No hurry." She watched his hand, the raw stripe across the palm, the neat rope burns edging already to scab. She wanted to say yes to the scarf, to the warm corner of his voice, to the idea that together might really hold heat. She also saw Peabody's paper like frost written in ink, saw Ruth's thin wrists, saw Mrs. O'Hara's books with their tired sums. "One step," she said under her breath, so soft only she could hear it. "One step back, then forward right." Aloud she said, "We'll keep the kitchen open. If the town sees soup, it might remember it has a stomach." Doc Estelle smiled into her cup. "A fine diagnosis," she said. Eli tipped his hat. "I'll be back before sundown with what the ridge can spare." He met Ada's eyes a beat. There was no press in it, no plea, just a promise to show up in all kinds of weather. He went out into the white. The door clicked the way it should, after a good repair. Ada touched the scarf on the peg. The wool was cool and steady under her fingers. She left it there. She ladled broth into the day, counted loaves, trimmed wicks, and made room around the stove. Outside, the wind wrote its own deadlines across the drifts. Inside, they stacked small mercies like cordwood, and the room held a little heat that didn't belong to any one person, which is the only kind that lasts. Sunday put on its best frost. The wind laid down to a low growl, and folks came out anyway, collars up, mittens doubled. Market tents were just boards on barrels with quilts tacked to break the bite. The church bell coughed once in the cold and thought better of it. Sheriff Harlan took a stand by the notice post, with his hat pulled low and his breath writing little psalms that vanished. Ada and Ruth rolled a kettle out to the square on a hand sledge, tin ladle hanging off a nail. Steam rose like a flag worth saluting. Doc Estelle set a crate for a counter and lined it with jars, tonics, a salve that smelled like camphor and stubborn, the few bandages she could spare. Old man Grady wore his good coat, which looked like his bad coat with a comb run through it. "Soup's on," Ada said to the square, not loud. "Pay if you can, eat if you can't." She kept the ladle moving, not because of crowd, but because hot stays honest if you stir it. Travis Holt arrived with 2 Circle H riders, hat cocked, grin easy. "Afternoon," he said, as if he owned the hour. He tapped the bank notice with a gloved finger. "Tick-tock. 45 turns to 44 at sundown. Figure I'd get a bowl of charity before it spoils." Ruth's chin came up. Ada's didn't. She filled the ladle like Travis was any winter-worn body and set the tin in his hand steady. "Careful," she said. "It bites a lip that talks too much." Snickers moved through the line, warm as a stove leak. Travis gave a half laugh and took a swallow, too quick. He hissed and covered it with a cough. Across the square, Eli led a mule with sacks slung even. Flour, salt, a crate of coffee he'd meant to keep for calving time, a bundle of kindling split clean as lath. He tied off by the trough and stacked his offering by Sheriff Harlan's boots. The sheriff opened his notebook slow, pencil dull from other winters. "Name it, weight it," he said. 3 sacks flour, winter milled, Eli said. 2 of salt, 1 coffee, not fancy, but it'll talk a man off a ledge. Kindlin' by measure and some coal for what it's worth. He kept his voice unshowy. Goes to Doc's list first, then to the pot that keeps this square from going hungry. Love this tale? Hit like, share, and subscribe to keep the West wild. Peabody's boy hovered near the post, cap low, eyes lower. He wrote the numbers on a bank sheet like a pen could keep a man warmer than firewood might. Doc Estelle's pencil moved just as neat in her own small book, names of the laid up and the light on wood. Travis slouched closer, soup in hand, a smear of good beef on his lip he hadn't earned. "All that buys you is a little more talk," he told Eli. "Auction day comes, Circle H will bid straight, cash on the barrel. Friendly dreams won't stand against coin." Eli didn't hand him his eyes or his temper. He looked to the people who'd left their stoves to stand in the cold and see what kind of town they were. He put his hat back a notch so his words had room. "Measure folks by who they stand with in a storm," he said. 1 line, it landed and lay there, a plank you could step on. Sheriff Harlan cleared his throat. "Hear this," he said, voice carrying because quiet wanted it to. "If seizure comes, it won't be done behind doors or with whispers. It'll be a public auction on this square, books open, bids plain, names recorded. Till then, this kitchen stays open under my say-so and the doctor's need. Any man trying to shut it will answer to me and the court." A murmur rolled like a low thaw through the crowd. The blacksmith's wife set a sack of potatoes by Ada's sledge and patted it like a child. The livery boy dragged over a crate of kindling and pretended he'd been asked. 2 miners put coins in Doc's jar and made a show of not counting how many. Travis's grin thinned. "Y'all can pass the hat till Easter," he said. "Come spring, Circle H will own this square if sense ain't found sooner." "Come spring," old man Grady said around a pipe he hadn't lit, "you'll be tracking mud through a town that fed you when your own pot went thin last year." He smiled without showing teeth. "Course that was a different Travis, better hat." Laughter shook loose, the good kind that puts color in faces. Travis shifted his weight and found nowhere to set it. Eli lifted one of the flour sacks like it weighed less than the look on Travis's face. He set it near Ada's sledge. "Make it stretch," he said to her, private but not secret. "I can stretch iron if it's warm," she said. Their eyes met a beat that had heat without smoke. She didn't touch the scarf still hanging back at the station in her mind, but she knew where it was and what it meant. Doc Estelle worked down the soup line, checking hands for cracks that might take a fever, tying a child's scarf tighter with a firm, kind tug. "Next Sunday," she told Harlan, "we'll run blood sugars and check lungs. Market's good for more than beans." "Post it," Harlan said. He turned to Peabody's boy. "And you tell your boss, paper runs the bank, but people run the winter. We'll keep count both ways." The sun slid a handbreadth across a white sky and gave up. Shadows from the 3 pines on the ridge reached long over the square. Black fingers laid gentle across boots and barrels and the pot that kept steam going. Ada felt those shadows like a blessing that didn't need words. She ladled and listened to the small sounds that say a town is trying. Spoons on tin, a cough caught and soothed. A boot tapping time to keep blood in toes. Travis finished his soup, found he had nothing left to add worth the frost it would cost him, and drifted off with his riders like tumbleweed that had hit a fence line. Folks didn't cheer. They went on eating. That's how change holds, quiet with the work. When the pot scraped bottom, Eli lifted the hand sledge tongue without asking and helped Ada haul it home. Ruth walked behind, kicking a ridge into the trail, so tomorrow's boots would know where to go. At the corner, Ada looked up. The 3 pines stood black against a pale sky, steady as old men who'd seen worse and kept standing. She breathed deep and tasted wood smoke and beef and a future that didn't promise easy, only together if we mind it. Cold's coming back up, Eli said. It always does, Ada said. We'll meet it at the door. The storm broke to a sky hard as tin. Wind cut thin and bright. Eli came with the sorrel and a spare roan, blankets double, a coil tied clean. Ada stepped out with her patched boots and the fur-lined pair she had not taken, looped by their straps over her arm like a question. Ruth watched from the porch, chin in her mittens. Back by noon, Ada said. If not, feed the fire like it owes you money. Ruth nodded, solemn as a deacon. They rode the grade slow, iron careful on glassy rock. Frost made lace of the creek grass. Above them the ridge shouldered the sky, and the 3 black pines stood like men who knew when to keep their hats on. The roan blew steam. Ada's knees ached, the way cold puts a hand on bone. She liked it. Pain that told the truth. 3 Pines Ranch sat lean under the trees. Low house, tight chinking, a windbreak of rails that had seen years and didn't argue it. Smoke lifted straight, then tore thin at the top. Eli swung down, tied off, and walked her along the yard without talk. He pointed with his chin. Pump there, bunkhouse there, hay sled under that lean-to, tack shed snugged to the barn's lee. He didn't pretty it. He named it the way men count cattle, present and honest. They stood a while where the ridge fell away. Silver Basin lay white and wide, the way station only a thumbprint of smoke. Wind moved through the pines, a long, even breath that spoke in needles. Ada let the sound go through her. It sanded down nerves that town talk had left rough. Eli kept his hat on because the cold said so. I want to ask again, he said. Proper as winter allows, no rush in it, no shine. Tie on with me. We'll make a house that holds when the wind tests it. Ada didn't look at him first. She watched a hawk hang on the wind as if the air had strings. She set the fur-lined boots on a rail between them. I'm not 20, she said. I won't pretend I am. I can't bear young. I won't try. Ruth keeps her schooling with Doc Estelle as long as the letters need. The kitchen at the station stays open. Sheriff will count what passes so folks know they're not begging. I don't do secrets where bread is concerned. Fair, he said. We split chores clean, she went on. You don't carry pride instead of sense. I don't spend myself to shadow. When talk comes, and it will, we let it blow past like any weather we can't fix. We buy nails and beans before we buy show. Fair, he said again, the word landing like a stake set to the frost line. She picked up one of the boots he'd left at her door days back. The stitching had been mended true, not pretty. The fur inside felt warm even in the cold, as if it remembered fires. She unlaced her own patch-scarred boot, bent, and worked it off. Cold bit the wet wool. She wrung her sock once, sharp, and slid her foot into the fur. Heat climbed her skin like a polite hand. She did the same with the other. When she stood, the boots changed the way the ground felt, not softer, truer. She looked at him then. I'll wear these, she said. I'll ride this ridge and stand to your wind. I keep my right to the back door stoop at Quartz Creek. First snow, I still step out and make my circle. You don't turn that into a show, and you don't join unless invited. Eli's mouth found a corner that wasn't quite a smile. I can be taught, he said. He took off his hat and held it against his chest for one breath, not for church, just for witness. The pines hissed like they'd heard vows before and knew better than to clap. He turned to the house and pushed the door with the heel of his hand. Bunkhouse wall can be moved, he said. Warmest room faces south. I can set a table there that won't wobble. Pumps stiff in the morning. I'll work the cup leather tonight. He pointed to a peg by the door. Scarf hangs there if it ever wants to. No hurry. Ada stepped inside. The place smelled of horse smoke and saddle soap, clean as a hand that's been working. She walked the floor like a field she meant to plant. 2 steps to the stove, 3 to the window, 1 to the wash basin, the kind of measure a woman takes without paper. She opened a cabinet, counted plates. She set her palm to the stove lid and felt old heat. "I'll bring flour tomorrow," she said. "Doc'll set a list for the kitchen. Sheriff will stand with a pencil bigger than his temper. We'll feed who needs feeding and let Peabody write his own cold." Eli nodded. "I'll haul wood to the station before dark. Coal, too. Sheriff can weigh it and take my name down where he likes." Ada turned back to the door and looked past him to the 3. "Pines, you got witnesses," she said. "They don't talk," he said. "They don't have to." Wind raised a little edge on the day. Ada set her new boots on the threshold and tested the give of the boards. Good sound underfoot. She stepped out to the porch, breathed until the air felt like hers, then looked over at him. "I will not use the word save," she said. "You're not saving me. I'm not saving you. We're keeping a house together in a hard county." "That's the word," he said. They rode back with the sun sliding off the ridge, shadows of the pines long as a hymn. The fur at her ankles kept the bite off. On the track above the draw she could see the way station's lamp hung on its nail, already lit against early dark. Ruth would be minding the pot. Grady would be telling the stove right from wrong. Sheriff would be practicing his patient face for fools. Town would have its lungs. At the edge of the yard, Eli eased the roan to a stop. "First snow up here," he said. "I take my boots off on the porch and stand a spell, just so you know." Ada looked at the circle she'd made nights before, now a fresh drift, unmarked. "You just got yourself an invitation," she said. The words felt right in her mouth. They fit like fur around cold bones. They led the horses in. Wind shouldered the door and lost. The 3 pines said what old trees say when 8 people do something plain and brave. Nothing at all, and everything that matters. Love this tale? Hit like, share, and subscribe to keep the West wild. Day 60 came iron gray and close. Frost bit the nails out of boards. Sheriff Harlan set a table in the square with a scale, a ledger big as a family Bible, and a pencil he'd whittled to a blunt that would not break. He posted a handbill that said, "Public count, noon," so the bank couldn't say the town did it sly. Ada rolled the kettle in on the hand sledge. Ruth carried a tin box with coins the size of hope. Nickels, 1 silver dollar that had lived a life already. Doc Estelle stacked receipts in neat bundles, her little doctor's bag open like a mouth that meant to speak only when it had to. Old man Grady dragged a crate that clinked like tools, but was only jars, pickles folks brought because they couldn't stand and watch with empty hands. The bank rig showed in a hush of bells. Peabody himself under a sealskin hat, boy at his back with a satchel and an inkstand, both of them smelling faintly of camphor and rooms that don't know wood smoke. Travis Holt drifted in with 2 riders, boots clean for once, hat cocked as if wind owed him something. Harlan tapped the ledger. "We'll take stock plain. Goods for the community kitchen will be counted at fair market, as set by Doc Estelle's price sheet and the store's tally. Coin will be counted as coin. I ain't a bank, Mr. Peabody, but I am the law in this square." Peabody arranged his face like a stack of cold plates. "The bank accepts legal tender, Sheriff. Sentiment ain't stamped by the Treasury." "Understood," Harlan said. "Town still needs to know who's carrying who." Eli came quiet, leading the roan and a pack mule that looked like it had opinions. He unlashed flour and salt, coffee he should have kept, 2 kegs of coal, a bundle of slab wood split to catch quick. He said the weight's low and sure. Harlan put numbers by his name without flattery. Others followed. The blacksmith's missus laid down potatoes and a handful of dimes. The livery boy brought a sack of oats and a promise to shoe a widow's horse for nothing come spring. The miners counted out coins they hadn't told anyone they had, eyes on their boots like prayer. A woman Ada didn't know pressed an egg tray into Ruth's palm as if it were a jewel. Doc Estelle set her receipts down last. Chits from men she'd doctored and babies she'd turned that hadn't paid yet. "These go against the relief box," she said, voice neat. "Folks will draw food and fuel as prescribed. It keeps the coughs from spreadin' and the town from spendin' undertaker money." Peabody's lip did a thing like he'd tasted a green walnut. "The bank does not—" "The bank can take coin," Harlan said. He opened a separate tin and poured in the miners' money, the dollar from the tin. 3 eagles the blacksmith had kept for a grave that didn't need diggin' yet. He counted slow and put the sum by Peabody's hand. "Interest due to this day," he said. "Paid from coin on the barrel. The rest is town business." Peabody flicked his eyes to his boy. The boy did his scratchings and nodded, throat bobbing like a bird drinking. Peabody stamped the paper with a tidy steel paid to date that clicked like a little trap. Travis cleared his throat and found a perch for his grin. "And the principal?" he asked. "Auction begins at noon by your own notice, Sheriff. Circle H stands ready to bid cash for the station and its improvements. No slight to Mrs. O'Hara's effort. Best for all if we move on from charity to sense." Ada felt the wind lift hair along her neck under the scarf. She kept her hands on the kettle handle and her eyes on the steam. Ruth edged closer till their sleeves touched. The square went smaller, the way places do when a deed gets written over people's heads. Harlan shut the ledger slow. "Auction notices are for arrears unremedied," he said. "Interest stands paid. Principal stands on schedule as agreed last spring. Next due come thaw." He set a palm on the book like a man quieting a nervous horse. "There'll be no auction here today." A silence took measure, then let out its breath in glove taps and boot scuffs. The kind of sound a town makes when it doesn't want to rile luck by clappin'. Old man Grady knocked his pipe bowl against his heel with satisfaction and no smoke. Doc Estelle allowed herself a nod, small as a stitch. Peabody made the face of a man whose chair has one short leg, and he's only just noticed. "Very well," he said. He tucked the stamped paper away, where papers go to forget they ever had to wrestle with weather. "To date," he repeated, as if the words might grow teeth later. He stepped back to his rig, boy behind him, like a shadow that wished for heat. Travis had to say something because his mouth couldn't stand being idle around the truth. "Wind can turn," he said to no one brave enough to be a someone. 45 days feels like 44 in a hurry. Eli didn't look at him. He looked at Ada, and the 3 pines threw long black fingers over the square as the sun shrugged through a thin spot in the sky. "Kitchen stays open," he said, half to her, half to the ledger. "Sheriff'll keep the pot honest." Ada lifted the ladle and filled a bowl for a man who'd been chewing on his mustache to hide hunger. "Pay if you can," she said. "Eat if you can't." Her voice didn't shake. The fear under her ribs had stepped back another inch and found it could live there smaller. Harlan raised his chin to the crowd. "Write it down at home," he said. "Not just here. Today you stood in the cold and did the math that keeps a place a place. Next due come thaw. We'll be here then, too." Ruth, solemn as a sparrow, opened the tin and set the silver dollar apart where it shone. "For luck," she said, "and to remember." Travis turned away because there wasn't anything left for his grin to eat. The Circle H boys went with him, their spurs not half chain, so jingly as they'd been coming in. Ada caught Harlan's eye, then Doc's, then Eli's. She didn't make speech. She poured. She took a breath that didn't hurt. Up on the ridge, the 3 pines stood to the wind, same as they had when nobody had thought to look up at them for witness. Snow squeaked under boots, the kettle hissed when cold hit its rim, and a square of people found their warmth the old way, shared out, counted fair, and held. First light came blue and honest. Frost furred the sled runners, rope burned cold where Ada's mittened hands took hold. Eli walked the lead, breaking the drift with long, steady steps. The track from Quartz Creek to the ridge had a thin glaze of night on it, and the mule breathed like a saw cutting slow oak. Ruth stood on the way station stoop with a quilt around her shoulders and a pencil behind her ear. The shape of a girl choosing her future the way you pick a good loaf. By weight, by sound. "Mind the fire like it owes you money," Ada called. Ruth nodded, small and sure. Doc Estelle lifted a hand from the door and tapped the pocket that held her spelling lists. Sheriff Harlan raised his chin from the square ledger under his arm, already counting the day fare. They took the grade in a hush that wasn't empty. Trees held it, snow held it, breath wrote it on the air. The 3 pines waited up top, black ink on a pale page. Eli's house showed low, under them, plank tight, stove breathing. He swung the door with his heel, same easy push as the first time, and stood aside like a man who knows what he's letting in is better than any draft. Inside smelled of saddle soap, split pine, and a clean pan warming for its life. Ada set down the flour and salt at the edge of the table, counted plates without counting. 2 for the room, more for whatever the wind might blow to the door. She tested the pump, worked the cup leather with force enough to make it honest, and not enough to tear it. Water came up slow and then right. She smiled without showing it. Eli hauled wood twice without being asked, and stacked it the way good wood wants stacking. Bark out, grain up. He set coal in a shallow box and chalked the measure where Sheriff could find it. He touched the scarf on the peg, left it hanging. The fur-lined boots looked like they'd always belonged where she set them last night. By noon, the ridge settled around the new pattern, like a dog turning once and lying down. Eli repaired a loose hinge on the bunkhouse wall. The room would take a table now without wobble. Ada made a pot of beans with a heel of salt pork and a handful of the potatoes the blacksmith's wife had laid down in the square. She baked a pan of bread that split its poop like it was happy to be here. They ate without talking much. Talk wasn't what fed them. After, Ada took the wash to the line between 2 pines, shook sheets till ice dust fell off like glitter you didn't ask for. She pegged them tight. A stranger came up the road, a rider with a raw cough and eyes that Joel said he'd slept on freight more than beds. Eli opened the door before knuckles hit wood. The man took stew on the step and stood to the lee. When Ada slipped a mended pair of mittens into his pocket, she didn't make a show, and he didn't make a speech. He tipped his hat to the pines on his way out, like you thank a place when you don't know who to thank. Toward evening, Sheriff Harlan rode by slow, boots white to the ankle, ledger put away for once. He thawed his hands at the stove and told a story about a winter when the river walked, ice plates stacking like bad cards. Old Man Grady drifted up after, pipe cold, pockets clinking with nothing but habit. He leaned on the jam and gave the pines the side eye like old men do when trees outlast them fair and square. "Place sit square," he said. "That'll keep." News drifted as news does in snow country. Silent, then all at once. Peabody had tucked his stamped "paid" to date into a drawer and gone back to counting in rooms that never smelled of soup. Travis Holt had found less to say since the square had tapped its gloves. Ruth read out loud at the station now, halting and then smooth, to men who ate with their hats off. The kitchen door kept its hinge true. People came. People left warmer. Snow began again at dusk, a soft new handwriting laid over the day. Ada banked the stove, wiped the table with the same neat strokes that had seen her through other roofs and other winters. Eli set the last stick on the pile and washed the rope burn in the pan. He dried his palm and didn't hide the scar. He looked at the door, then at her. "First fall," he said. "First fall," she answered. They went to the porch. Wind had let down, snow drifting straight and quiet. Ada unlatched her boots. Fur sighed around her ankles as she stepped out. She peeled one wool sock, then the other, and set her bare feet on the unstepped edge of the world. Pain came sharp, honest, and then leveled to something she could live inside. She turned once, slow, a circle small as a wedding ring and big as a county. Eli unbuckled white breath in the lantern light and put his feet beside hers. Not to lead, not to follow. Together they made a second circle, close enough that heat passed without words. "Ain't the years?" he said, as if the pines had asked a question. "It's the winters," she finished, and the line settled between them like a beam that would carry weight for a long time. They stood a while, listening to snow talk to the roof, to the creek under its lid, to the three pines telling the old story in their needle voice. Hold, bend, hold again. Ada thought of the square, of Ruth's pencil, of Doc's quiet ledger of mercy, of Sheriff's blunt pencil that would not break, of a town that had found its heat the way folks always do when it counts, shared out, weighed fair, her feet burned as blood came back. She laughed once, soft, the laugh that had surprised her, in the lantern light down at Quartz Creek, the sound of something thawing where you thought it might stay winter forever. Eli's mouth found that not-quite smile he wore when a thing fit right. They put socks back on and laced up. Inside, the stove gave a contented tick. Ada hung her shawl, set 2 bowls for morning, laid out flour by habit. Eli folded the day into the woodpile and checked the latch with a thumb, quiet as a kept promise. Snow kept falling, the house held, the pines kept witness and didn't say a word. And if a stranger had passed on the road and glanced up at the ridge, he might have thought he saw 2 people standing to the cold and letting it know its match, not with shouting, not with miracles, just with the plain work of staying. "Let it snow," Ada said into the warm. "We stay. Snow keeps its own counsel. Folks don't. If Ada and Eli's porch circles warmed you a little, tell me so. Comment 0 if the snow dance stuck with you. 1 if you want more Old West winters like this. Saddle up with a subscribe. There's another trail ahead, and I'd be proud to ride it with you.